While my cousins celebrated their millions at my grandfather's funeral, I stood there holding a crumpled envelope with a single plane ticket inside. Everyone in that room laughed at me that day. 6 months later, those same people were begging for my forgiveness. My name is Liam Callahan, and this is how the worst day of my life became the beginning of everything I didn't know I needed. To understand how, you first have to meet the other players in the game my grandfather orchestrated from beyond the grave. There was Evan, my older cousin, in a $5,000 Tom Ford suit, already practicing his CEO speech in his head. Chloe, his sister, barely hid her excitement behind oversized Gucci sunglasses, probably deciding which Instagram filter would best capture her new yacht. Their parents, my Uncle Gregory and my Aunt Eleanor, stood like vultures who had finally found a feast, Gregory's hand already drifting toward the papers in the lawyer's hands. And then there was me, the high school history teacher who drove 4 hours in a Toyota Camry that needed new brakes, just to say goodbye to the only person in this family who ever really saw me. My grandfather, Arthur Callahan, built an empire from nothing. He turned one rusty delivery truck into Callahan Global Logistics Incorporated, and everyone wanted a piece of his kingdom. Everyone except me. I just wanted 5 more minutes to play chess with the old man who taught me that the most powerful moves are the ones no one sees coming. That funeral wasn't only about saying goodbye to Arthur Callahan. It was the day I learned that sometimes the smallest gift carries the biggest secret, and sometimes the people laughing at you are standing on ground that's about to crumble beneath their feet. My alarm blared at 5 a.m. every weekday, just as it had for the past 7 years since I started teaching at Northwood High in Cleveland. The ceiling in my one-bedroom apartment had the same water stain I'd been staring at for 4 years, shaped vaguely like the state of Florida if you squinted hard enough. My neighbor's beagle barked on schedule, and Mr. Henderson's morning news droned through the paper-thin walls. This was my life, predictable, modest, and disconnected from the world I was born into. Being a Callahan meant something in certain circles. It meant exclusive golf clubs and Ivy League legacies, summer homes in Nantucket, and heavy stock portfolios. For me, it meant choosing between paying my student loans and fixing my car's transmission because I'd walked away from all that to teach teenagers about the rise and fall of the Roman Empire and the architecture of the American Constitution. My father, Michael Callahan, understood that choice. He was the only one who ever did. He died when I was 16, massive heart attack at his desk, while reviewing contracts for his brother Gregory's division at my grandfather's company. He'd spent his life being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who never complained when Gregory took credit for his ideas. The last thing he ever said to me was, "Liam, don't let them turn you into something you're not. Promise me you'll hold on to who you are, no matter what they offer you." For hours later, he was gone. My mother, Sarah, picked up the pieces. She was a registered nurse at Cleveland Metro Hospital, working bruising 12-hour shifts to keep us afloat after we learned Dad had signed away most of his company shares to cover Gregory's catastrophic investment losses. That was my dad, always cleaning up messes, always believing family meant limitless sacrifice. Mom never said a bitter word, but I saw how she looked at Gregory at the funeral, and I learned that sometimes the deepest anger doesn't need words. My grandfather was a mystery wrapped in a 3-piece suit. He built Callahan Global Logistics from a single truck he bought with his Army discharge pay after World War II. By the time I was born, he owned a fleet of cargo planes, warehouses in 15 cities, and enough money to buy whatever he wanted. But here's the thing about him. He didn't believe in giving. He believed in earning. Every birthday card came with $50 and a note that said, "Make it grow." Every Christmas gift was practical. Biographies of industrialists or certificates for online courses in supply chain management. The only time he seemed genuinely interested in me was during our Sunday chess games. It started when I was 11, right after I won my school tournament. He showed up at our apartment one morning, set up a beautiful ivory board, and said, "Show me what you've got." I lost in 15 moves, but he came back the next Sunday and the next, and those games became our one constant. "You play like your father," he told me once, eyes fixed on the board. "Too worried about protecting your pieces, not focused enough on winning the game." "Maybe I don't want to sacrifice everything just to win," I said, nudging a knight into the open. He actually smiled, his first unguarded smile. "Maybe that's why you're the only one who still interests me, Liam." Evan never understood those games. He was too busy shadowing my grandfather at the office, learning about profit margins and tax shelters. He got his MBA from Wharton, grandfather's alma mater, and never let anyone forget it. Every family dinner became Evan's personal TED Talk about market optimization and strategic acquisitions. He spoke in buzzwords and PowerPoint slides, turning conversation into a pitch. Chloe took a different route. She turned herself into a brand, chronicling life as the logistics heiress. 300,000 followers watched her pose on yachts in designer outfits at European hotspots. She called it building her platform, but she was just spending my grandfather's money while waiting for more. Gregory and Eleanor were the ultimate power couple in the hollowest way possible. Gregory had worked his way up to CFO of Callahan Global Logistics, though most of the real work was done by a team of overworked accountants. Eleanor spent her time at charity galas, not because she cared about causes, but because she liked her picture in the society pages. They lived in a house so big they needed an intercom just to talk to each other. And then there was me, teaching 45 teenagers about the New Deal, grading papers at a kitchen table I bought at a garage sale, feeling more fulfilled than any of them could imagine. That was my life before the funeral, before the envelope, before everything changed. I thought I knew who I was and where I came from. Turns out, I was watching the wrong pieces on the board all along. The Brookside Country Club had never felt more suffocating than it did that November afternoon. My grandfather had requested his will be read there, in the oak-paneled room where he had negotiated his biggest deals over scotch and cigars. The polished mahogany table reflected our faces like a dark mirror. Evan adjusted his Rolex for the third time in 5 minutes. We'd just come from the cemetery, where cold autumn rain turned the burial into a muddy mess that Eleanor complained about the entire ride over. "Before we begin," said Mr. Davenport, the family attorney, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "I want you all to know that Arthur was very specific about these arrangements. He reviewed this 3 days before his passing." Gregory leaned forward, hands clasped. "We understand, Davenport. Arthur discussed the succession plan with me extensively. It was a lie and we all knew it. My grandfather never discussed business outside the office, and he never promised anything to anyone. But Gregory had been telling anyone who'd listen that he was taking over as CEO, that Evan would be his right hand, and that the family legacy was secure. Let's proceed." Mr. Davenport opened a leather folder. "To my eldest son, Gregory Callahan, and his wife, Eleanor, I leave the estate in Nantucket and the investment portfolio in the account ending in 829. Eleanor grabbed Gregory's arm, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "The Nantucket house. Oh, Gregory." He did remember how much we loved it there. "To my grandson, Evan Callahan," Mr. Davenport continued, voice flat. "I leave Callahan Global Logistics and all operational assets, on the condition that he maintains current employment levels for at least 18 months. Evan stood so fast his chair scraped the floor. "I knew it. Grandfather, I won't let you down." He was already pulling out his phone, probably updating his LinkedIn to CEO. "To my granddaughter, Chloe Callahan, I leave the Chicago penthouse on Lakeshore Drive and the yacht Serenity, currently moored in Miami." Chloe squealed. "The penthouse. Oh my God, do you know what that's worth? And the yacht. My followers are going to die." Mr. Davenport turned to me, and I saw something in his eyes that looked like pity. "And to my grandson, Liam Callahan, I leave this." He pulled out a small white envelope, worn at the corners, my name written across it in my grandfather's shaky handwriting. The room went silent for 2 seconds before Evan started laughing, loud and braying, echoing off the wood paneling. "Are you serious? That's it? An envelope?" I took it with steady hands, though my heart pounded a frantic rhythm. The paper felt thin, insignificant. Inside was a single plane ticket. Bordeaux. One way. Departing in 72 hours. Let me guess. Evan snatched the ticket from my hand before I could stop him, the paper crackling in his fist. A coach ticket. How quaint. Grandfather left the teacher a little vacation. Chloe lifted her phone, already recording. "This is hilarious. Liam, your face right now? Don't worry, maybe he left you frequent flyer miles, too." Gregory stood, straightening his tie with the authority of a man who thought he'd won everything. "Arthur always said you lacked the killer instinct, Liam. At least he gave you something nice. Bordeaux is lovely this time of year." It's probably his way of saying goodbye, Eleanor said, voice dripping with sympathy she didn't feel. A little trip to help you process. How thoughtful. My mother, silent until then, spoke, her voice clear and steady. Is that everything, Mr. Davenport? That concludes the distribution of assets, he said, closing the folder. There is, however, a personal letter for Liam, only to be opened upon his arrival in Bordeaux. A letter? Evan almost howled. What's it going to say? Sorry you're poor, enjoy the wine? Evan, enough, Gregory said, still smiling. Liam chose his path. He wanted to be a teacher, and Arthur respected that enough to give him a parting gift. We should be grateful for what we received. I looked at the ticket. November 12th, 2 p.m. Air France flight AF88. Why so specific? Why Bordeaux? My grandfather had never mentioned France during our chess games. He'd talked about Shanghai, London, Hamburg, but never Bordeaux. Well, I stood, sliding the ticket back into the envelope. I guess I'd better pack. You're actually going? Chloe looked surprised. You're going to use your sick days to take a random trip to France. My grandfather gave me a ticket, I said, meeting their eyes. The least I can do is use it. Gregory shook his head. Sentimental fool, just like your father. Michael never understood that emotion has no place in business. That's when I knew I was getting on that plane. Gregory was wrong about my father, wrong about me, and maybe wrong about what my grandfather had really left me. The ticket weighed nothing, but somehow it felt heavier than all the millions they'd inherited. As I walked out of the country club, their laughter trailing me to the parking lot, I remembered my grandfather's last words during our final chess game. The best moves, Liam, are the ones your opponent never sees coming. The rain had stopped, and for the first time that day, the sun broke through the clouds. That night, I stared at the plane ticket while my laptop displayed my bank account balance, $2,112.56. Rent due in 5 days. Car needed brake pads. 45 essays on the Industrial Revolution to grade. Every logical part of me screamed that flying to Bordeaux was insane. But I couldn't stop thinking about that last game 2 weeks before he died. He'd been softer that day, like he had put down a role he'd played for decades. Liam, he said, moving his knight in a pattern I didn't recognize. What do you know about trust? It's earned, not given. I answered, the line he drilled into all of us. No, boy. Real trust is knowing when to follow without understanding why. Your father knew that. He trusted me with something once, something precious, and I failed him. But you, Liam, you're different. You don't want anything from me. I never have, grandfather. I know. That's why when the time comes, you'll trust me, even when everyone else thinks you're a fool. Holding the ticket, his words felt less like memory and more like a directive. I called my mother. I'm going, I said. I knew you would, she replied without hesitation. Your grandfather called me last month. He didn't say much, only that I should support whatever decision you made after the funeral. Mom, this is crazy. I can't afford to miss work. I have responsibilities. Your father once told me Arthur wasn't always the man we knew, she said. He said there was a before and an after, and we only knew the after. Maybe this is about the before. The next morning at Northwood High, I arranged for a substitute. My principal, Dr. Ramirez, hated the sudden request, but I'd never taken a sick day in 7 years, so she grudgingly approved 3 days. 3 days to fly to Bordeaux and figure out my grandfather's game. Mr. Callahan, you okay? Maria, one of my brightest students, caught me after class. You seem different today. Just thinking about history. Maria, how the most important moments can look like nothing when they happen, I said. I packed light. 1 carry-on, 2 changes of clothes, and my father's old leather journal. The rideshare to Cleveland Hopkins International cost me $45 I couldn't spare, but I was committed. At the gate, I pulled out the envelope again. That's when I noticed something I'd missed. In the corner, barely visible, a tiny number in pencil, 1948. Boarding started. I found 29B, a middle seat in the back. Of course it was coach. As the plane lifted off, Cleveland shrinking below, I thought about Evan in my grandfather's office, Chloe posting yacht sunsets, Gregory and Eleanor meeting financial advisors. And me, cramped in coach, flying toward a mystery with money I didn't have. For the first time since the funeral, it felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. Something to drink, sir? The flight attendant asked. Just water, thanks. As I cracked the bottle, I remembered a lesson. My grandfather had once sacrificed his queen, his most powerful piece, to win a game. I was stunned then, unable to see why he'd give up so much. Power isn't about what you have, Liam, he said. It's about what you're willing to lose to gain something better. Most people can't see past the loss. That's why they never really win. The plane banked east, into the night, toward Bordeaux and whatever he had hidden there. My cousins thought they'd won everything that mattered. Settling in for the 9-hour flight, I had a feeling the real game was just beginning, and I was the only piece he positioned to play it. The captain announced our cruising altitude, and I closed my eyes, my father's journal pressed to my chest, trusting a dead man's plan even though I couldn't see the board. We touched down at Bordeaux, Marignac Airport at exactly 2:15 p.m. local time. My legs were cramped, my back ached, and I'd barely slept. French announcements mixed with English as we taxied, and reality hit me. I was in Bordeaux with no reservation, no plan, and no idea what to do next. Immigration was a blur. Purpose of visit? The officer asked. I honestly don't know, I said. He stared, stamped my passport. Welcome to France. I followed the crowd into the arrivals hall, a chaos of reunions. That's when I saw it. A printed sign reading Liam Callahan, held by a man in a black suit. My heart stopped. I walked over. I'm Liam Callahan. Relief washed over his face. Mr. Callahan, finally. Please, come quickly. His English carried a French lilt. Who sent you? Your grandfather arranged everything months ago. My name is Mark. Please, we have a drive. He took my bag before I could protest and led me to a black Mercedes that probably cost more than I made in 2 years. Mark opened the rear door, and I slid onto leather that felt like clouds. Where are we going? I asked as we pulled away. Château Heritage. About an hour east, near Saint-Emilion. I don't understand. My grandfather never mentioned an estate in France. Mr. Arthur owned the estate for 50 years. Every October, 1 week, always alone, Mark said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. 50 years. He would have bought it in 1975. I wasn't even born. Nothing made sense. We left the city behind, the road threading through the Bordeaux countryside. Neat rows of vines, low stone walls, and plain trees lining the lanes like green cathedrals. How did you know my grandfather? I asked. My father was his driver first. When Papa died, I took over. 25 years now. I drive Mr. Arthur when he comes. 25 years of October visits none of us knew about. What else had he hidden? The lane narrowed past a hamlet where old men nursed tiny coffees and watched us pass. Electronic gates opened onto a honeystone château, 3 stories, shuttered windows, terraces looking over endless vines. Before I could process, the massive doors swung open and an elderly woman stepped out. Elegant in a way money can't buy. Silver hair in a bun, eyes the same steel gray as my grandfather's. She walked toward me with tears streaming down her face, and I knew before Mark spoke the words that changed everything. Liam, he said softly, meet your grandmother, Isabel. The world tilted. I grabbed the car to steady myself. That's impossible. My grandmother died before I was born. Isabel reached me, taking my hands in a surprisingly strong grip. Your American grandmother did die, mon cher, but I am very much alive. Her accent was musical, her English formal. She studied my face, memorizing it. You have his eyes, she whispered, but your father's gentle spirit. Come inside, Liam. There is much to tell you. Inside, the chateau was understated elegance, nothing like Gregory and Eleanor's gaudy mansion. In a sitting room, the walls were covered with photographs. My grandfather, young and laughing, stood in front of a small church in a wedding photo. My grandfather and Isabel, both barely in their 20s, radiant. We married in 1948, Isabel said, watching me try to absorb it. Arthur came with the army, stayed after to help with reconstruction near Bordeaux. We met at a dance. He was handsome and full of dreams. We started with nothing. Just a few hectares of vines a friend sold us for almost nothing. She poured 2 glasses of wine from a crystal decanter. This is from our vineyard. We call it heritage. Inheritance. The wine was extraordinary, complex, rich, alive. I don't understand, I said. He had a whole life here. More than a life, mon cher. He had a family. Me, our son Matthew, and the grandchildren he never met because he chose America instead. He left you. The Korean War began. He felt duty calling. He was to be gone 6 months. No bitterness, only sadness. On leave, he met your American grandmother. She was pregnant with Gregory. An honorable man would have divorced me, but Arthur could not bear to give up either life. So he kept both, separate, secret. My hands shook. He lived a lie. No, Liam. He lived 2 truths. He loved us both, in different ways. The vineyard grew. He sent money. He visited every year. He could not choose. Not until now. She walked to an antique desk and lifted a thick folder. Callahan Vignobles International, $52 million in assets. It's all yours, Liam. He was very specific. Not Gregory. Not Evan. You. The documents were overwhelming. Deeds, contracts, bank statements. Proof of an empire on the other side of the Atlantic. But what hit me hardest was the video Isabel played on an old laptop, recorded 1 month before he died. My grandfather's face filled the screen, peaceful for the first time I could remember. Liam, if you're watching this, you trusted me enough to take the flight. Good. You always were the only one who understood that some things matter more than money. Your cousins got what they always wanted, the appearance of success. But appearances deceive. Callahan Global Logistics has hemorrhaged money for 5 years. I covered it in the books, but Evan is about to inherit a disaster. The penthouse carries 4 mortgages. The yacht is leased. The Nantucket estate, the bank holds 80%. I gave them exactly what they valued. Hollow prizes that look impressive but are built on nothing. He leaned closer. But you visited me every Sunday just to play chess. You never asked for anything. You chose teaching over money because you wanted purpose. So I'm giving you what you never asked for. Truth, family, and yes, wealth that's real. The vineyard produces 3 million bottles a year. This château has been in Isabel's family for 400 years. Your uncle Matthew runs operations. Your cousins here, Lucas and Sophie, are good people, nothing like Evan and Chloe. This is your real inheritance. A family that values work, land that makes something real, and a legacy built on truth, not lies. His eyes sharpened. And your next move is yours. My advice, Evan will call within a month, begging for help. Be kinder to him than he was to you. That's what will make you better. Checkmate, my boy. The screen went dark. Isabel squeezed my shoulder. He talked about you constantly, she said. Every visit, stories about his grandson, the teacher who chose meaning over money. I spent a month in France learning everything. Uncle Matthew looked so much like my father it hurt. He ran the vineyard with quiet efficiency, never bitter about being the hidden son. Lucas and Sophie welcomed me like a brother returning from war. They taught me about wine, about the land, about a version of my grandfather I'd never known. He was different here, Sophie said one evening as we walked the vines. Lighter. He worked in the fields, hands in the soil, laughing. Not the stern businessman you knew. Evan called me exactly 28 days later. I had just returned to Cleveland and my classes when my phone rang at midnight. Liam? It's Evan. We need to talk. The arrogance was gone. His voice sounded scraped raw. The company's bankrupt. The accountants found everything. Dad lost the house. Chloe's penthouse was foreclosed yesterday. It's all gone. I'm sorry, Evan, I said. No, you're not. And you shouldn't be, he said, taking a ragged breath. We were horrible to you. A pause. Grandfather left you something real, didn't he? Yes. Good, he said quietly. You deserve it. You were the only one who actually loved him instead of his money. The next day, I made Evan an offer. Manage U.S. distribution for heritage wines. Salary, not ownership. Build something real. He accepted immediately. Chloe took longer to swallow her pride, but she came around. It turns out she's brilliant at marketing when she's selling more than herself. She's engaged to Mark's son now, living near Bordeaux and learning the business from the ground up. Gregory and Eleanor moved into a small apartment in New Jersey. Gregory found work as a bookkeeper. Eleanor took a job at a department store. They don't speak to me, but Evan says they're calmer, forced to rely on each other instead of money. My mother moved into a small house on property I bought in southern Ohio. She retired from nursing and paints most days, something she always wanted to do. And me? I still teach, but only part-time. Summers and long breaks I spend in France, learning the business and the family I never knew. My students think it's hilarious that their history teacher owns a vineyard. I use it to teach them about trade, agriculture, and the way legacies can twist across oceans. Last week I was in the château playing chess with Matthew when he said something that stopped me. You know, your grandfather always said the winner isn't the one who takes the most pieces, but the one who knows which pieces matter. I looked at the board, then at the vineyards, then at a photo of my grandfather on the wall, young and hopeful in 1948. He won, I said. It just took 65 years for the game to end. Matthew smiled. No, Liam. You won. You just didn't know you were playing. That crumpled envelope, they all laughed. It wasn't just a plane ticket. It was an invitation to discover who I am, where I come from, and what matters. My grandfather gave my cousins what they thought they wanted and gave me what I didn't know I needed. The last bottle he personally produced sits in my apartment in Cleveland, unopened. The label says Heritage 2024, and underneath, in his handwriting. For Liam, who understood that the best inheritance isn't what you're given, but what you're trusted to continue. Every Sunday, I still play chess, sometimes with Matthew in France, sometimes with students in Cleveland, sometimes alone, thinking about the old man who orchestrated the longest, most brilliant game I've ever seen. He taught me that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in truth, family, and the courage to trust when nothing makes sense. It turns out the board everyone else watched was just a distraction, because the real game was on a different board, in a different country, with rules only my grandfather understood. And he made sure I was the only one invited to play. Thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel.